In what had previously been a U.S. air campaign against ISIS in Syria. That effort will now involve U.S. troops on the ground engaged in combat. American Special Operations Forces, numbering fewer than 50, according to the White House, will deploy in the Kurdish-controlled area of Syria to help fight ISIS. Secretary of State John Kerry spoke of the change in strategy today in Vienna.
He authorized a small complement of U.S. Special Operations Forces to deploy to northern Syria, where they will help to coordinate local ground forces and coalition efforts in order to counter Daesh.
Daesh is the acronym of the Arabic words for ISIS. Today's announcement comes just over a week after Army Master Sergeant Joshua Wheeler was killed in combat during a raid to free ISIS prisoners in Iraq, a country in which the U.S. supposedly no longer had a combat role. And the announcement arrives after repeated assurances by President Obama that the U.S. strategy against ISIS would not involve boots on the ground in Syria.
I will not put American boots on the ground in Syria. I will not pursue an open-ended action like Iraq or Afghanistan. I will not pursue a prolonged air campaign like Libya or Kosovo.
The White House is insisting that today's announcement represents an intensification in strategy, not a change, while also acknowledging the risk.
The mission that the Commander-in-Chief has given our military personnel in Iraq and now in Syria is a train, advise, and assist mission. And we have gone to great lengths to make clear that that is in no way diminishes the amount of risk that our men and women in uniform will be facing.
Whatever the semantic distinctions, the intensification looks like part of an inevitable trajectory towards greater U.S. military involvement in the Syrian civil war. Joining me now, Juan Cole, professor of history at University of Michigan and author of The New Arabs, How the Millennial Generation is Changing the Middle East. Professor Cole, you're someone who's been chronicling the region and studying it for a long time. You've been critical of U.S. Intervention. You've advocated for U.S. intervention in the case of Libya. What do you make of today's announcement?
Well, I think that today's announcement is probably an acknowledgement of something that's been going on for a little while. The U.S. has hooked up with a leftist Kurdish militia in northeast Syria, which has been the best Syrian actor for fighting ISIL. And since Obama's emphasis is on defeating ISIL, perhaps depriving it of its capital in Syria at Raqqa, it is the Kurds with which the U.S. is partnering.
The Kurds have been probably the most effective, if not one of the most effective forces in fighting ISIS. They won a very brutal battle at Kobani near the Turkish border. Of course, what complicates this is that Turkey, a NATO country, absolutely hates that group, is scared of them, has been trying to bomb them at times. So what does that do to that relationship?
Well, Turkey says that it bombed the Syrian Kurds on Friday, and I don't know. It's possible that one of the reasons that this announcement has been made is to signal to the Turks publicly that if they bomb the Syrian Kurds, they're in danger of bombing U.S. troops because they're embedded now, and to hands off. But this is a big fight, as you say, between the U.S. and Turkey.
Well, this is a really good point. It leads me to the thing that I've been thinking about. I've been listening to this amazing podcast called Hardcore History by Dan Carlin. He's got this epic about World War I. And I got to say, listening to it and reading the news out of Syria, you start to wonder, are we going to end up in a situation where one country, all these different countries are involved via proxies, Russia's bombing, Turkey's bombing, the U.S. is bombing, Iran is on the ground, different people have on the ground. You're going to end up in a situation where, I don't know, Russia accidentally bombs a U.S. Special Operations Commando. I mean, what are we headed towards here?
You know, that is not completely impossible, but it's a little unlikely because you have to think about the Syrian civil war as having theaters. So there's a northeast theater that's mainly Kurdish and ISIL, and then there's a northwest theater that's mainly now Russia and Al-Qaeda. So each of these areas are places where there's a kind of concentration on a particular enemy. You know, Syria, as you say, is very complex. It's not like a football game where there's two sides. It's more like a poker game where there are like 5, players and each of them is trying to win.
Yeah, and in the middle, just tremendous and unceasing carnage, misery, and horror for the people of Syria, the blameless people of Syria, who are knocking at the door of the European countries as they try to flee. Juan Cole, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.